there's always times in life where things show up, toddlers, shift work, stressors, major life change, parent health issues, all kinds of things. So in those moments, how do we navigate that? And one of the things that I've found, it's this really paradoxical relationship to sleep, particularly when we're talking about insomnia, which I really don't even like that term, but it's really just a label for a snapshot in time where we're having difficulty falling asleep or staying asleep. And sometimes it can be interrupted by external things. And then sometimes over time, as we get more activated with our nervous system, now those external things are waking us up. And now we're keeping us up because now we're stressed out. And now we're struggling to kind of turn off. So sometimes facing those fears, and if you look in the world of psychology, some of the most effective, where we have very high efficacy around exposure therapy. And interestingly enough, it's almost as if we're giving ourselves exposure therapy with sleep during the stretches of time where we're not getting the type of sleep that we'd like to have. And so on the other side of that, when we start to learn, even though we might not like it, even though it might not be something that we would design for ourselves, that we can still get through that day ahead. And that kind of reframe oddly lowers that kind of stress response, lowers the performance anxiety that can almost come about of each night ahead. And then in the process of that, then we can start to slowly restore workability with sleep.
Welcome back to the Evolving Wellness Podcast. When it comes to health in 2026 and what you want to focus on, sleep is the foundation. Sleep has to be something that you really, really hone in on and optimize. And I understand, believe me, we're going to talk about that in this episode. It's challenging when you have family members, children. Sometimes you get these intrusive thoughts and stress, and there's so many different things that can interfere with your sleep, even when you have the basics of light optimized. Now, Molly Eastman, who is the founder of Sleep is a Skill and is also a friend of mine who's helped me offline, especially with some toddler sleep regression strategies that I've had to deal with in the last few months. I'm going to have all of her information down in the show notes for you. So I highly recommend that you check her out, follow her. She's got a great podcast and a lot of great information. I also have a free webinar on light and health. That's going to be something I offer ongoing to podcast listeners. That's down in the show notes. So you'll see the My Circadian app free webinar. It's going to teach you all about how to set up your morning and your evening, your lighting, all of that. Even comes with my free light bulb guide to really optimize the light side of things. But if you do the light side of things already, then this episode is for you to take this a step further. One more thing before we jump into today's episode, I wanted to let you know as a podcast listener, there's a way to get these episodes sooner than the general public. And that's going to be on my brand new Substack. I'm really getting fatigued with a lot of social media, with a lot of the commenting, the mean people, and just having to fit into these algorithms. And so I've really been trying to build something lovely over on Substack, which is more long form content, early access to these episodes. And if you become a free subscriber, you're going to get my seasonal food course as well as my UVB red light therapy protocol for free as well, just for becoming a free subscriber. So head down to the show notes to check that out. I'll have a link for you. And it's a deeper way to connect as well beyond these videos. So I'm excited for you to check that out, and even more excited for you to check out this episode with Molly Eastman. Without further ado, let's jump into it. Welcome to the Evolving Wellness Podcast, where circadian biology and quantum biology meet nutrition, lifestyle, hormones, health, and everyday conversations. I'm your host, Sarah, board certified in applied quantum biology by the American Naturopathic Medical Board and certified in nutrition by the National Academy of Sports Medicine. This is just a quick little reminder that you'll never hear a guest on this podcast whose every stance I agree with. And that's the point. These are conversations and not consultations. The information shared here is for information and educational purposes only, and is not a substitute for medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the guidance of a qualified, trusted professional for all of your personal health needs. If you want more of my content, including my free long-form articles with citations, free ebooks, membership group with more access to me and my Circadian app that helps you integrate light into your life seamlessly. Make sure to visit www.sarahkleinerwellness.com. Thank you so much for listening and enjoy the podcast. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the podcast. I'm super excited to have my friend Molly Eastman here, who is a sleep expert. And yes, I talk about optimizing circadian rhythm and optimizing sleep through sunlight and darkness, which is very basic. But Molly really takes it a step deeper. And that's why I'm excited to have her today, because I know some people still struggle, even though they get the circadian stuff down. Molly, welcome to the show.
Sarah, thank you so much for having me. I know our struggle is going to be how to confine all of the things that we want to talk about in a particular period of time. You and I, we can just go deep. So I appreciate the work you do, and I'm excited to dive in on all things sleep.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm excited. And we can do a part 2 if we don't get to everything today. I selfishly just chatted with Molly for the last 45 minutes before I hit record.
Oh, the feeling was mutual, my friend.
We were just going on about all the things. So maybe we'll have to do a part 2. I always say one of these days I'm going to do that and hit record before and no one knows. And it'll be the podcast before the podcast. That's the juiciest stuff. But
the best.
For now, we'll have to.
Yes. In the meantime. Okay. Yes. We'll plan for that.
Exactly. So I think what's important for people to know is the reason I brought you here today was selfishly that about, 6 weeks ago or so, time blurs together.
I know.
My son had a major issue where he no longer would sleep, period. I think it was potentially nervous system dysregulation and just a lot of things. I had someone else on the podcast last week that talked about some of the wiring in the brain. Corindy, actually, she knows you.
Yes. Amazing.
Yes. And we talked about some of the wiring in the brain and how that can shift directly around the age of 3, how that could have played into it. It's multiple things, but
sure.
I was panicked. I was not in good shape.
And listen, I've been there, so you're in good company. Yes.
And I think the crux of maybe we can start with is that I was very stressed out because I am already very aware of night shift workers and how, not sleeping and being on night shift, that contributes to cancer. And I've done episodes on that and talked about that at length and posts on that. And I'm thinking oh crap, I have a circadian disruptor called a toddler.
Yes.
That's not allowing me to sleep. And I'm deprived. I'm tired. I'm exhausted. He got sick for a week and I had to be on call, 24 hours a day. And I was just stressing out. And so that's when I reached out to you, and it was so helpful. I mean, just even to talk to you was really helpful. But some of the things that we talked through, I think will be helpful for anyone who may have a chronic circadian disruptor called a child, toddler, baby.
Yes, absolutely. Well, and I'm so glad you said that too. And just your kind of vulnerability in sharing that, because that's something that's so crucial for me, is also sharing that that was part of what got me into this space, was because of the fact that I went through this period of insomnia while traveling internationally. And it was one of my rock bottom moments. And a big part of that was kind of the spiraling that started to happen of almost starting to learn and know too much. And if I can, kind of say it that way, because then once you start to learn about some of these deleterious effects of what can happen when you don't get enough sleep or inconsistent sleep and all the things, you can really freak yourself out. So it's this fine line, right, of how to both really prioritize our sleep, take care of our sleep, make time for it, set ourselves up powerfully, know all of those things that you share so beautifully that can make such a difference for our sleep-wake cycles. And really with the goal of, kind of spoiler alert, making a lot of this happen automatically as much as possible, so we don't have to think about it too frequently. But there's always times in life where things show up: toddlers, shift work, stressors, major life change, exactly, parent health issues, all kinds of things. So in those moments, how do we navigate that And one of the things that I've found, it's this really paradoxical relationship to sleep, particularly when we're talking about insomnia, which I really don't even like that term, but it's really just a label for a snapshot in time where we're having difficulty falling asleep or staying asleep. And sometimes it can be interrupted by external things. And then sometimes over time, as we get more activated with our nervous system, now those external things are waking us up. And now we're keeping us up because now we're stressed out. And now we're struggling to kind of turn off. So what you're pointing to is so valuable because ultimately this training of resiliency, this training goes back to at this point in time, in the United States, the gold standard approach is supposed to be when you're struggling with sleep to recommend CBTI, cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia. And part of the reason for that is ironically or interestingly, some of the practices within there actually have you expose yourself in a certain way to sleeplessness or less sleep than you might like to see for yourself. And so that process, now, if anyone's listening, they're like, oh, I've tried CBTI and it didn't work for me. That was also me too. So hang tight. There's additional things that we can talk about. But one of the things that I think is interesting is sometimes facing those fears. And if you look in the world of psychology, some of the most effective, or we have very high efficacy around exposure therapy. And interestingly enough, it's almost as if we're giving ourselves exposure therapy with sleep during the stretches of time where we're not getting the type of sleep that we'd like to have. And so on the other side of that, when we start to learn, even though we might not like it, even though it might not be something that we would design for ourselves, that we can still get through that day ahead. And that kind of reframe oddly lowers that kind of stress response, lowers the performance anxiety that can almost come about of each night ahead. And then in the process of that, then we can start to slowly restore workability with sleep. So I'm so glad you pointed to that because the more we know, sometimes can freak us out more.
Yeah. And I think what I hear a lot with my members, because I have a lot of females in my group, I have a couple men too, but a lot of the women, we think about this stuff like we've already talked about. We think like, oh my gosh, I'm not getting the sleep. It's a mess. I don't know what to do. It becomes a big deal in the head. And then going to sleep, going to bed because of the insomnia, because of the sleep disruption becomes stressful. And it's like, even just thinking, because that's how I felt like during that time with my son, and you helped me really kind of go off of that ledge a bit. I felt like I wasn't going to bed. I was like going to war.
Yes.
I'm like, I'm going to war, and I think some people even see their bed and the night and they get stressed out over it.
Yes, sleep anxiety, 100%. That was one of the big things that I had dealt with at the height of my insomnia was I was beginning, and it's really interesting in my case, part of what got me into the mess of being an overactive, obsessive thinker, thankfully in a weird way, was part of what oddly got me out of it because I obsessively went down the rabbit hole to learn everything that I could around sleep and what it takes to get great sleep. And that was one of the things that had me stumble upon circadian biology, quantum biology, chronobiology, the science of time and how time affects our biology. But that wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for a fixation on my sleep. And I was freaking myself out. And we see that for a lot of people where now suddenly there's a whole stress response. People have likely heard of that kind of almost cliche Pavlovian response at this point where, you start to link up a set of reactions and the bed, something that you would think would be largely either a neutral or hopefully a positive stimuli, that we often see the opposite happen where now we're starting to stress out about it. So that's one of the reasons why stimulus control within this world of CBTI gets a lot of press time because for some people it can make a big difference because now you're just really designating your bedroom for this old adage of sleep and sex so that you're starting to not hopefully link up those levels of stressors. When you wake up, you are, if you've been up for a stretch of time, you're leaving your bed, going into another room, taking a little bit of time. Now, I will say this is a time when I would introduce that For me, and there is a group that tends not to do quite as well with CBTI, and I was one of them, which tends to be this overly anxious, overthinking group. And it would kind of freak me out. Were you sort of this too? Okay. Right. And so it would actually stress me out more because, at least in that season of my life where I would leave the bed and now I start thinking, okay, well, now I've been out here for how long? I don't know, 30 minutes. Yeah. And it's like, I got a big day tomorrow and la, la, la. Now I'm freaking myself out more. And now I'm getting frustrated and angry. And then I go back into bed. And then the dreaded process of like, this is this kind of snowball where we're going to keep doing this all night. And that process was really stressful. Now that's where I'd introduce another kind of approach, a little bit newer, I'd say, called ACT, and particularly ACT for insomnia. So acceptance commitment therapy for insomnia, ACTI. And the difference that one can make is you can still borrow, you can kind of use like a Venn diagram with both of these practices and kind of overlap and take what, kind of fits for you. But one thing that I found for myself and for others that really makes a difference or tends to make a difference is this, where if you start to think of your time awake in bed at, say, 2 a.m, and during that time, if you begin to practice, dare I say, acceptance, which I know can be like, come on, like, just give me the good stuff, right? But in the process of practicing that acceptance, can we actually know that we're still giving our body restoration and that we're still getting right, some level of, support is happening for the body and mind when we lay in a supine position in a darkened room and kind of just train to relax a bit. That we've found tends to remove a little bit of that pressure because that performance anxiety gets all amped up, and sleep and pressure do not go well together. It tends to be sort of that Chinese finger trap. If the more you try to escape it, then the more stuck you are. So that process can be really helpful. And I think you and I were chatting about this concept of paradoxical insomnia, which is also a really interesting aspect of things, where often when we are going through these periods of time where maybe our nervous system is more activated, we're in a sympathetic dominant state, that the body and mind, we tend to see, if we hook you all up in, say, a sleep lab and we're in the other room watching you sleep, you might think, oh, see, by the morning you take everything off and you say, oh, can you believe it? I didn't get a wink of sleep. And then the person who was watching you the whole time was like, wait a minute, you got a decent amount. Maybe it's not the best night ever or something, but you got hours and hours of sleep. And that the knowledge that is a common thing that can come up can often be supportive, because it helps us to question, all right, maybe my subjective reality of the amount of sleep I got might be a little altered during this acute period of time. And it's possible that my body is really intelligent and is kind of getting these micro sleeps, if you will, and stealing sleep throughout the course of the night. And we're not gaslighting and not saying, okay, oh, you should be fine then. But instead just saying, okay, at least during this period of time, it's likely you're getting a little bit more sleep than you might realize. You can likely now get yourself through this day. Maybe you make adjustments. Maybe it's not a time to drive across the country or something after a night like that, but just be thoughtful. But where possible, that you can, kind of make it through this day ahead. And the more we train for that, and the less we fear those sleep deprived days, the more that charge can soften a bit.
If you're not new to my work, you already know the importance of sunlight in your daily life. But what if you have to work in an office all day long? How can you offset some of that blue light? Now, the work of Professor Glenn Jeffrey shows that preconditioning your body with red and infrared light before going into a blue lit environment actually helps your mitochondria buffer the stress of that environment. And I would recommend anyone who works in an office or has to be indoors a lot this winter to have a source of red and infrared on their desk with them. That is why I absolutely love this Bond Charge mini red light panel. And I keep it here on my desk while I'm working in my office and recording videos for you guys. And they've given me a discount for all of my listeners. All you have to do is go to the Bond Charge website, which I'll put down in the show notes for you, and use the code Sarah Kleiner for everything on the site. You can get 15% off. But if you want to get this little Bond Charge red light mini panel, this is really my favorite tool for anybody who has to work in an office and has to offset some of this blue light, because let's be realistic, we can't just quit our jobs and move, even though we might want to. So learning how to live in the modern world and mitigate it is going to be extremely helpful. And the research is there to show that red and infrared light is immensely helpful if you're in a blue lit environment. Head to bondcharge.com and check out the mini red light panel. Use the code Sarah Kleiner, all one word, to save 15% off. There will be a link down in the show notes.
Yeah, that was one of the most helpful things that you told me when I was freaking out, is because like with my son just like chronically just getting up, and now even with my daughter, like she'll get up and then be up and then she'll be jumping around, and it's like, you know?
Yes.
And if I was going into the spiral and, I'm not getting sleep and someone's up and it's just noisy and da-da-da. And so I just kind of had the Molly voice in my head saying, you're still getting some of these sleep benefits by being laying down in a dark room at night, and all is not lost. All is not wasted. That was really important for me to understand, because I think, again, in the health world, especially, we're so caught up in like being perfect and getting the protocol and getting 8 hours of sleep and having a perfect score on the Oura ring. And I haven't worn an Oura ring since I was pregnant with my son, because
I understand.
First trimester, my sleep went to crap. And then I saw this like green light going off, and I was just thinking, I don't really want to do this to myself anymore. And I had already been, to get pregnant, overanalyzing every bodily function and temperature drop and raise. And I'm like, I just can't do this. And so it's been very freeing to me to not have the Oura ring. Now, I probably should strap it on every now and then to check in on some metrics. That's fine. But I know.
Listen,
I know if I slept bad or not. I really can tell. I can tell, you know?
100%. I've been tracking in some way, shape, or form since 2012, back when the Zeo was available, which went out of business. But it was really ahead of its time. It was almost like the TiVo, you know, when it was just too much too soon. That was the Zeo. And so tracking for extended period of time. And I just took the last year with no tracking on purpose, because I wanted to, I'm writing a book around sleep and this concept of sleep being a skill set, and wanted to also have the kind of stretch of time for a number of reasons, but 100%, there are so many times in our lives where it makes all the sense in the world to take a data vacation, and or for some of us, we might not even want to delve in to that world of data whatsoever in general. So what I'd say is yes to that. Yes to owning the fact that there is a bit of this nocebo effect. We've, of course, know the placebo effect, but the nocebo effect, we see that with sleep, where in certain research where we might tell participants that slept totally fine. Oh, wow, you slept horribly. And suddenly, their whole experience of their day ahead and their error rates and their the way they show up in the world can often shift accordingly. So there are real world effects. Now, I will say, if possible, depending on the person, if it is a fit where maybe there's not a lot of sleep fixation or what have you, for certain stretches, even for, for just a period of time to get a little snapshot of what's going on, I've seen it also be so supportive for some behavioral shifts that are just wonderful, that can extend the course of your life. The most common basic ones, when I see people use wearables, very quickly, we often see them start to be bowled over with how much, of course, alcohol makes such an impact, right? Like we see that just totally.
Like, wait a minute.
Yes.
I shouldn't probably be drinking.
Exactly. THC, how much that one can often be a surprising one for people because we might, and understandably, it can feel like, well, this is the natural approach and this is so much better. It's going to be better. And certainly it is from a steps, like a spectrum standpoint. Say if you're dealing with major pain and cancer or something is there where you're looking for that pain management and it's that, or, OxyContin or something,
I mean, there's a trade-off. That's the thing I think that ties into the conversation. Sometimes you have to do the best you can with the situation that you're in, and it's not ideal, Yes.
We were talking about that before, before we hit record. It's just, there's certain times, like a part of my story is one of the biggest moment of kind of like shame and upset came when I was at one of my lowest moments. All of this kind of really flared up when my husband and I were traveling. We've been together 14 years and we'd get a one-way ticket. We thought that would solve all our problems because we were entrepreneurs, stressed out. And then actually it like flared everything up because suddenly, you got all this variability. And I grew up with no money, not a lot of money, in a trailer and just, I'd never really traveled much. And so jet lag, I wasn't familiar with, and just this variability. And so at some of my lowest moments while we were traveling, I went to the doctors in Croatia and leave with a prescription for, because it's, 1952 Valium, basically they gave me.
Oh, wow.
So, it's an oldie time.
That'll put you to sleep.
Exactly. And I was so conflicted because it was this mix of fear because I come from a family with a lot of mental health issues and heavy pharmaceutical use. So it was this like, oh no, is this the moment where I start going down this path of being dependent on all these things? But at the same time, being desperate and wanting to sleep and feeling like I'm losing it. Right. And so then in those moments, and I know, okay, I'm definitely taking this tonight and I'm definitely taking this the next night and the next night. And at the same time, can we get ourselves educated and learn some of the things that can make a difference so that there's a path out of this? But sometimes during those periods, there are those acute things. Now, that's why things like benzos, which is in that class of Xanax and the Ativans and what have you, those are approved for short-term use. Yes, exactly. And so it's when we start crossing the path into we've addiction. Almost resigned. And like, okay, well now I can't trust myself to be able to sleep in this case of sleep. And now we're kind of outsourcing that ability to something external that can start getting tricky over the long term, not to mention some of our fears around long-term specific use of benzos or Z drugs, and Z drugs being more of the, Ambiens and Lunestins and that sort of thing. So it's a really interesting, complicated area when we look at sleep, where there's both a lot of this, so much of what you speak to is going to support a big foundational component of the things that we're doing, just for the automaticity of this workability of being diurnal creatures, active by day, at rest at night, facilitating the environmental, behavioral components of that. A lot of that helps to kind of take care for the average person, many of these things. But then there's also stretches of time where, particularly if we are talking about insomnia, that's kind of outside of the domain of just like, I'm not really prioritizing my sleep, or, who needs to sleep? Sleep when you're dead. Or the people with sleep disorders, there's over 100 sleep-wake disorders. Of course, insomnia is a disorder. But we often think about that one commonly a little bit differently and approach it a little bit differently, because often those people are so educated. And it's what you and I were talking about too, in this health space. Many of us we learn too much, and that can start to backfire. Yeah.
Ooh, my throat just got dry. Sorry about that.
Oh my God, no worries.
It's been so unseasonably cold and dry here. It's crazy.
Oh my gosh. I know. Same over here. I was telling you, I almost recorded this outside, but it was getting like a little cold and windy. Have you tried that sun hug, by the way?
Brian keeps emailing me. I need to email him back because he wants to send me one. And I'm like, all right, I will. I have like so many emails and things that I'm trying to constantly manage, but he has been in contact. I met him at a retreat this summer. Very, very nice guy. So
Fun. Yes.
Because
I know I just got to chat with him a little bit ago and loved his like enthusiasm for the whole thing. But yeah, I share that just because that was the other thing. I'm like, I couldn't do it inside my sun hug, but that's going to look a little wonky. So, you know.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah. I think there's so many things in this conversation that are so important for people to understand and to know. And, you know, with the sleep aids, I've been on that side of like taking Lunesta, Ambien every night. And I definitely don't recommend that, you know, and then transitioning to trazodone, then transitioning off completely. Once I learned how to meditate, I was able to stop within 6 months of getting trained to meditate. Like it was amazing. But I think it's one of those things you need to know the risk going into it. And you don't want to be using those things long term, because there's research showing, and I know you could probably speak a lot more eloquently to this than I can. There's research showing that you're not able to tap into that glymphatic drainage system that we need to have when we're sleeping. So the brain is essentially not getting into those deep repair states when you're using those medications. Of course, the dependency issue, risk for Alzheimer's and other kind of mental disorders. Like what else should people understand about getting involved in those class of medications? Yeah,
I'm so glad you said that. And what you just pointed to is actually a big part of the reason why we're starting to see sleep come a bit more into the conversation with more vigor than it had in previous years, was because first off, the area of sleep as a study is relatively young. And really interesting point about that is that sleep as an area of study appears not to really have come into vogue until around the Industrial Revolution, when what happened, we largely went indoors under electric lights at night. And so that was a marked time when we started seeing rates of insomnia go up and fragmented sleep and a whole new relationship to our sleep. If anyone is interested in that, it's a great book called Mapping the Darkness, the award-winning journalist who studies and maps the darkness of this area of study of sleep, because it, you know, along with, say, psychology, both of these areas are relatively new. So having said that, only in 2012 did we discover glymphatic drainage with a G versus lymphatic drainage with an L. And so that wasn't that long ago. And so just in 2012 was this kind of connection where we started to see that it appears that a large percentage of this cleansing of the brain that happens routinely each day looks to largely happen while we're sleeping, particularly on the first part of our night. And it's really fascinating in that it's so beautifully done that the brain really shrinks in size, and then the cerebral spinal fluid then is able to wash over and almost like power scrub, super soak the brain to get this amyloid beta plaque, tau proteins, and help to remove some of that buildup that's happening every single day. And that is a beautiful time each night to set aside to ensure that that largely does that. However, unfortunately, as a result of our modern society, a number of things that we are doing are impacting our abilities to reliably tap into that deep sleep, and the depth and breadth of that deep sleep is calling into question. So what are some of the things that would do that? Well, sleep is a skill. One of the things that we take people through is what we, point to around circadian rhythm entrainment. So much of the things that you beautifully speak to and allow us to see on the ground with the app that you've created, the My Circadian app. So when we're taking people through that light dark aspect of the setup of their days, certainly is going to be a huge piece of that puzzle. Our temperature timing, our meal timing, our exercise timing, our thought timing, which is a fascinating one. I think you and I might have chatted about this one, and new research to point to our thoughts actually existing in alignment with these rhythms and shifting throughout the course of the day and into the night with real world consequences, meaning that we see suicide rates and homicide rates go up in the wee hours of the morning. And so that's a really interesting factor. We've got evidence to support that the time of day is going to impact how you're thinking about your troubles in your life or what have you, right?
It's always darkest before the dawn is a true
Beautiful
statement.
Yes. So there's like wisdom to some of these statements. They don't just come out of nowhere. There's absolutely something there. And then the last one that we look at is, chronopharmacology, to make it fancy, but that's really the timing of our drugs. And our medications and how those can impact both, hopefully either positively or negatively, depending on the time of day and the quantity and how they're impacting our body. So with all of those considered, certainly some of the medications that we might be taking could impact our sleep architecture and play a role in impacting our ability to get into that deep and rich levels of glymphatic drainage. And so when we see that night after night, what appears to show up is correlations, and we're still trying to make that clear causation, but certainly correlations between that happening night after night and risks of Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, dementia, these neurodegenerative diseases flaring up, and the similarities between brains of sleep-deprived individuals and brains of people with, say, late-stage Alzheimer's, and having similarities with things like amyloid beta plaque, tau proteins. And so what can we do to support this? Well, one, if there are medications, we want just to at least be informed and know that this could impact both deep sleep, but then also REM. And REM, and really by design, that's one of the things we see with SSRIs is commonly, impacting the amount of REM that we're getting. And so at first glance, it can kind of make sense when you think if someone's depressed and they might be sleeping a lot. And oddly, one of the things that they find to reduce the symptoms of depression in a relatively quick period of time is to actually have people sleep a bit less. And so they're having a bit less REM, which is very odd to think about. And so that's one of the practices that's happening, it appears, with things like SSRIs, because it's impacting the amount of REM that you're getting, shortening that. And then you're having a bit of now a shift instead of depressive state, kind of coming back, hopefully, to baseline. However, we still have a lot of questions about what does that mean over the long term of having some of these. And then certainly when you talk about things like our benzos or our Z drugs, because at the end of the day, often we see that they're not really extending total sleep time by very much at all. I mean, sometimes we're talking minutes, like 10, 15 minutes for all of these risks. Now, of course, this isn't medical advice, and you want to be thoughtful. And but it's really important that we get this education out and realize how new some of these things truly are. And we're kind of messing around with things that could have real world consequences.
Blue blockers are a highly debated topic in the alternative wellness world. There are a lot of people that say that they don't work and that they're pointless and useless. And I have to agree with that, because there are some brands that are pointless, useless, and don't work. When you test them with a spectrometer, they do not block the spectrums of light that they need to block in order to protect your circadian rhythm. So you've got these glasses that are promising to give you a health benefit that don't. So I will agree with some of those people on that point, but I will disagree in that the research is extremely clear. When you look at the spectrum of light that sets the brain up to say, hey, it's daytime, we don't want to have that coming into the eye at night. Viva Rays is the brand I have used and trusted for the last 4 years, actually almost 5 years now, to protect my circadian rhythm, because they block the spectrum of light that they actually say they do, the meaningful spectrum of light that signals to the brain that it's daytime. I've tested this personally with a spectrometer, and it's the brand I recommend to clients as well. So if you're looking to upgrade your health this year and get a high quality pair of blue blockers, check out Viva Rays. You can use code YOGI to get extra savings. There's a link down in the show notes. And thank you to Viva Rays for sponsoring today's episode.
Yeah, I think that's my issue with the medical industrial complex and even the functional medicine model as well, is that we don't have long-term data on a lot of things that we're just kind of giving blanket, do this, and this is going to work well for you, and this medication is totally safe and effective, and it's fine. We could talk about that all day, but also in the functional medicine world with different supplements, we think we just take one thing and it's just the one thing. There's always a system in the body that is impacted. And going back to our original point that brought us into this is sometimes you just have to say, look, I got to do this for now.
Yes.
And work on the terrain and fix it while I'm in this situation because it's so acute and it's so insane. I just need some freaking relief,
Yes.
You have to look at all sides. Like I did a post about vitamin D because I found some research that essentially showed vitamin D supplementation at like 4,000 IUs over 90 days ended up suppressing pineal melatonin. Dropping the melatonin levels. And people just got so angry with me about this.
Yeah.
So angry. And I'm like, look, it's a study. It gives us information as human data. Yes, it was done on people with MS. So their immune system is a little bit different, but it's data is data. And we already know vitamin D and melatonin use some of the same receptor sites. So this really makes a lot of sense, And I got people like, I can't sleep unless I take my vitamin D. I take 10,000 IUs of vitamin D. I'm like, look, okay, this is helping you at this moment. I'm not saying that what you're doing is making you a moral failure. I'm saying that there is always a trade-off when we're messing with our biology, and being aware of that and having some sort of informed consent is important. So when, again, going back to these drugs, my friend Erin, the natural minded mama, when her son was on life support, her baby was on life support, she took Ativan, and she was like very honest about it. I was like, girl, I good on you for telling the crunchy community, which is way harsher than I think my community here, that, hey, I thought my son was going to die. My son was on life support. I didn't think he was going to make it. I couldn't sleep. I was having such severe anxiety and panic attacks that I did a short-term course where I had to take Ativan.
Yeah.
And she's not on it anymore. She's not still addicted to it or taking it. But, we have this perfectionistic mindset about things. And so, just knowing the risks of what you're getting into, what it's doing. And hey, maybe we need to go hook up with Molly, understand some of these other things that we can optimize to get sleep in a better spot. And that can even just be the way that you're thinking about it, which was what was the most helpful for me, Oh,
I'm so happy you said what you said there, because it's one of the biggest things that drives me, for some kind of context, when I went through that period of time and when I did then take those exact medications, there was such a fear and upset, and I was fighting that medication just tooth and nail each night, because I was like, why am I taking that? I can't believe this. What a failure. Oh my God. Da, 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 da. And just that negative judgment was certainly not serving anyone. Now, it's what I want to bring for the conversation of sleep is that nuance that you're pointing to, because there is nuance. Now, what I want to educate on, this idea of sleep being a skill, I'm really passionate about, because if we just kind of like lay down almost like learned helplessness and we say, well, I'm just a bad sleeper, it's how it is for me,
label yourself and
the label. Yes, exactly. And then if we say, I'm going to take these things and this is kind of how it's going to go for going, I would offer that if we are going through, and exactly those are kind of what they're designed for, is exactly the cases that you mentioned. There's been a death in the family. There's major crises. There's
major crisis. Yeah. It's life. This is an inevitable part of life. It's going to happen,
Yes. And so having that, and then what I would love to bring into that conversation, as opposed to, unfortunately, I think in our medical system right now, when it comes to sleep, the average doctor has about 2 hours of training in sleep, even out of Harvard Med. So even if they have the best of intentions, commonly there's not going to be a lot of nuance and education that they can provide. And so you might just be given a prescription and kind of sent on your way. So what I would offer is, how can we, as of right now, until kind of the system shifts, how can we we kind of take this upon ourselves to educate ourselves to build this skill set. It is worth building the skill set around sleep. It's something we do a third of our lives, on average 26 years are spent to sleep.
Right.
So if we can learn about some of these things, then while we're in that acute phase, then we can have that foundation at play. Like I often, when people come my way, and maybe they've been taking some of these medications for years and years and years. And part of their goal when they come in is to get off of these things. Now, of course, we work in tandem with, their doctors and what have you. But during this period of time, often what we do is bring in the foundational components first so that they build in that strong muscle, if you will, of the skill set of sleep. And then once we've got sort of that education in play, then we can bring about a smart and thoughtful, maybe low and slow kind of tapering process, depending on what they're on, and have a plan in place. So all that to say that we want nuance. We want to not just flog ourselves during stretches of time where we might need added support, but also in that the more we learn, it often can remove some of the boogeyman of the mysticism of, well, why am I not sleeping? What is going on here? To actually get at the root so that you then have tools and skill sets that can completely this is actually acts as really a meta skill, because once you start to have some of that skill set, to question some of those thoughts, like you were saying with the meditation piece, to be able to let certain of those pathways of stress go. When we learn about our thoughts being a little bit different at 2, 3, 4 in the morning,
understanding
and how
that about yourself, like, oh, I'm in my dark period.
Yes, exactly.
My dark brain is on.
Yes. If we think of, I just did my newsletter yesterday on sleeping, relating to potentially sleep is almost like a weather forecast. And you can almost forecast that around 2, 3, 4 in the morning, it's going to be kind of, treacherous weather ahead. It's likely you're going to need the windshield wipers.
So I tell my husband when he starts talking, I'm like, no talking.
Yeah.
Because I know the dark side is going to come out. I'm like, just don't do. We'll talk about it tomorrow. He'll always bring in. Oh, it gets really dark.
Yes, exactly. Well, and activating
We're
too.
We're not going to fix this now.
Yeah. And I'll see people too that they'll be like, well, I'm not, talking about stressful things. I'm talking about the trip I'm going to be taking or whatever. And that is also activated as that EU stress. And all of these things, when we think about the thought timing piece, we had one of the sleep coach for the Olympics on the podcast 2 times. And one of the things that he was speaking to with, these people that their entire lives have been about training for this one day, basically. So imagine no pressure. And so in the lead up to that, they almost have them trained to anticipate that they're likely going to have funky sleep, not to mention time zone changes and what have you, but just the anticipatory anxiety of this big moment. So one of the things that they'll speak to is just having a lack of novelty in the, kind of hours, or certainly at least around like 90 minutes or so before bed. And that novelty can be as much as whatever, starting a new Netflix show, listening to the new exciting podcast, book, whatever, or talking to our significant other, our kids, about stressful things or exciting things. All that activating novelty can be something that we have a say over. And that's really at its core is we're looking to step back and see what are the things that we have a locus of control around, and the things that we don't. How can we practice acceptance and surrendering, which is a tricky one. And so for those of us that tend to have problems with sleep, they actually do have a bit of a demo for people that deal with insomnia. And it appears to have a higher amount of people that have kind of rumination patterns that are common. I mean, raise my hand, overthinking tendencies. Yeah, right. Sure. There's certain types of people that might then struggle with these things. But the beauty is this meta skill is that this will trickle into all aspects of our lives and bring about more peace and support in other areas, social anxieties, health anxieties, all of these fixation pieces. So now you'll have new ways of being available to you.
I love that. That's so important. I think, this conversation and just talking with you, myself, was kind of about zooming out a little bit and seeing bigger picture. And I think that that's what, when you're in the middle of insomnia, when you're in the middle of like freaking out because you're not sleeping, because things you can't control, certain things, you can't zoom out. Like you lack that ability to just kind of look at things overhead and say, okay, what are the things that I can change? What are the things that I do have influence over? And say, okay, I'm going to have dark thoughts at this time. I can be like, hey, ignore that. I'll do that with myself. When I'm waking up and I have those moments and I'm starting to freak out, I will repeat little mantras in my head. I'll have little prayers that I'll say, or I'll do my meditation, which is a mantra that was given to me. And those things kind of turn that off. It kind of has to tune it out because it can take over. And then you're in this horrible, anxious loop, and I think that's my wish for people listening to this is like, let's zoom out a little bit,
Yes. Yeah. I love that you said that. And just again, so appreciate your vulnerability and sharing because absolutely, we're all going to have stretches of time where this will flare up, especially if you are out to live a big life. I work with a ton of high performers, particularly high stakes poker players of all things. And
really interesting.
Yeah. They're really fascinating. That's kind of, some of the focus of this book that I'm putting together because they are in casinos designed literally on purpose to confuse the circadian rhythm. And you of all people they could really use my circadian app inside some of these casinos. It's bad. It's like blue light. There's no windows. There's no clocks. Like who knows what time it is, what's up, what's down. And not to mention the levels of stress, so poker players call it your tilt, the amount of stress that you're experiencing. And it can be really exciting stress. It can be you're up millions of dollars, right? Or it could be you're down millions of dollars. But either way, there's a lot going on. And then the expectation that you are up till 3-4 in the morning. Now you've got to go home, especially if it's a tournament, and find a way to relax and go to sleep and do it all over again. That can be tricky. But what is so important when we're talking about sleep is that the more we learn that there's kind of this duality here where we're both prioritizing, we're getting information, we're understanding what are some of the big levers that we can pull, but at the same time, how to practice acceptance, surrender, let go when the sleep does not look the way we would like it to look.
Exactly.
Right? And build resiliency because we don't want all these people running around being fragile. And that's really one of the things I'm really trying to be thoughtful about in the information that I'm putting out, because I do see that there's been certain times over, the decade that I've been in this world of sleep where I've been like, you got to do this. Da, 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 da. And so I really want to make sure that I also provide that nuance because it is this fine line. And sometimes the more we say, oh my God, I'm going to get so sick and unwell if I don't get my sleep, then it's the very thing that backfires.
Exactly. Yeah. So there's an attitude that has to come with it too. And I love this whole conversation. I think it's so important because, getting the sleep optimized through the things we talk about, both of us, with the light and the timing of exercise and food and, red light therapy and all that other stuff, sauna, cold, understanding those Zeitgeibers. A lot of people can glean that, but then they have this up here, that's talking them out of getting that restorative sleep because the situation's not ideal and things are not ideal. And if you want to move out to the middle of nowhere and have no family and have no social life, then perhaps the perfect sleep score will be available to you. But the rest of us have other...
Oh my gosh, Sarah. If we do a part 2, yes, that is a big one I've seen. And for periods of time for myself too, because it's kind of the more you learn, sometimes you can freak yourself out. And then it's like, oh, well, there's so much, EMFs here and da, 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 da. And so then then there can be a tendency of like, well, let me go the exact opposite. Let me go to a little cabin in the woods. But then you learn that social connection and feeling a part of a tribe and something bigger is so important to your health and well-being too. So how do you grapple with all these things? So there's nuance, there's things that we can start to weigh the cost benefit. And it's not always perfect. So I'm so glad that you take a stand for that, because it can get really dicey when you start looking at these components and you try to get it so right that you're actually stressing yourself even more. This biology of belief is really real.
It is. It is. Yeah. We'll have to talk about that in part 2, because that's another hill that I'm going to die on, is telling everyone they need to move to the equator and leave all their friends and family and in order to heal and get better. And I just find that we are not putting enough emphasis on the support and connection that we have with our families, with our loved ones, with our friends, and how important those things really are to nurture those relationships and be with them. Even if you live in Canada and it's freaking cold all year, you have those anchors and those people that can in some ways make up for a less than ideal environment. So bigger conversation.
Yes, it is. Well, I know you've been so great in getting out the information. We're chatting about our mutual friend, Sarah, and her ability to, kind of share this concept of we can get well at any latitude. Yes, to all of that. So I never want anyone to feel, a sense that great sleep is not available to them. So I think my closing thought on all this would be really just trying on this concept that sleep is a skill, and that no matter where you're at, and maybe you're listening to this and you're like, I'm listening for my partner because my sleep is great or whatever. Even if things are really working for you, that I would argue that there's always things that we could do to support, to take things to the next level, to kind of up level, to optimize support. And if on the other side of things, when different seasons of life emerge where we might have been really proficient and used to getting great sleep all throughout our 20s and 30s, and then 40 and 50 emerge and our sleep is different, there's always going to be new kind of mountains to climb. And I think that this is the exciting, I feel truly so thankful, which is crazy because when I was in the midst of it, I did not feel thankful. But now I get to feel thankful because it really feels like an area where it touches everything. So sleep and certainly the same conversation with you and I, the circadian health, it touches everything in our lives. And so it does. Right? It's going to transform. And there's an opportunity while we go in at it to address sleep, what's available is suddenly we have a whole transformation in our whole life in many areas that take on new meaning to transform, because now they're going to impact something so fundamental as your sleep-wake cycle.
Yeah, I love it.
Amazing.
Well, Molly, if someone's just driving along listening and they want to find you because they're just like, okay, I'm in, I have to get Molly's courses, her information, dive deeper, learn more. Do you have a website? And what's the best way for people to find you?
Yeah, thank you for that. Sleepisaskill.com is a great spot to do a lot of things. So one, you can take a sleep assessment, and that can get you, kind of targeted information right away for free. The second thing is that we have a weekly newsletter that's been going out for over 7 years every Monday. We never miss a Monday. So I'd love to have you on there. Then we have weekly podcasts, and would love to, then go in deeper with you at some point and share all of your amazing wisdom and your app, because we talk about your app all the time. So I'd love to have experts like Sarah and others that we get out. So that's been for about 6 years, that podcast. And then lastly, if you're looking to really take things to the next level, we have cohorts that are enabled by, you can bring about wearables if you want, you can bring about non-wearables. So there's different tracks, but with the intention of by the end of your 8 weeks that we're working together, that you are really left more proficient in this area and with truly tangible, both if you're wearing wearables, we can point to the difference that's made. If you're tracking more kind of analog, sleep diary or what have you, or just the subjective experience, that you have a whole new relationship and results with your sleep by the end. And then if the things are really been flaring up, we've got one-on-ones, or if you just want to kind of of a one-off. We do sleep audits. And so we can kind of audit your sleep, whether with wearables or with in-depth assessments and using AI and various things to really get you in action right away is the intention.
I love it. Well, sleepisaskill.com. We'll put that in the show notes. And then you've got Instagram and your podcast, and we'll link all those too. So amazing. This has been so much fun. And we'll definitely have to do it again for sure. So thank you.
Oh, well, thank you so much, Sarah. Thank you for the work that you do. Creating platforms like this makes such a difference. And, you know, so much of largely the things that Sarah's pointing to for many people can make such a difference in that foundational piece of sleep. And then love to kind of tag team with the things that Sarah's putting out there. Just love the work she's doing. And then in addition, you know, going down the rabbit hole in some of these maybe sleep disorders or other things that we can support people on. That's truly my mission on the planet.
I love that. Well, thank you, Molly. This has been amazing. And I can't wait for people to listen to this. And we'll definitely have to do a part 2.
Yes, absolutely. Please, game on.
Amazing.